You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you once again, and plenty to dive into today. Before we're out of here, we're going to get to what's actually happening as we open up a brand new month, the month of June, on campus. Big recruiting efforts underway as we roll through the next 30 days. And I'm going to use that to also catapult into a question I have about the general future. You know how I like to pick your brain about answers no man can possibly have at this time. I've got some of those types of questions about recruiting efforts moving forward as it relates to high school versus, say, transfer portal prominence and what we've gotten used to in some recent years. But wanted to kick off today's conversation and spend some time with you on something else we learned over the last few days following Big 12 meetings, Big 12 conversations. We got into a little bit of what we learned about the Big 12 hoops schedule on our most recent episode. Catch up on that if you've missed it. But today I wanted to spend some time talking about essentially the stance that the Big 12 took as it relates to their preference when it comes to the college football playoff and its future format. The conversation as to the leverage or lack thereof that the Big 12 also has is probably a separate one we can have, but it was back to go to the game, baby. We're doing what's right in Big 12 country. The rest of you can do what you want, but we're doing what's right. 5+11, a 16-team playoff, minimal automatic qualifiers for the highest ranked 5 conference champions, and then a free-for-all, I suppose, for the at-larges. But what did you make some of the details, expected, unexpected, that we heard from Brett Yormark and in general the league recently?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a big topic. They're under the gun a bit on timing because there is no format set up for the 2026 season and beyond currently. Many formats have been discussed. Many formats have been suggested and even favored and even reported as this is the most likely. And it seemed to change in the last week and a half. We've really never talked about a 5+11. It was always the AQs. It was always, some form, like that. And I was very curious on because at first the Big 12 was like, hey man, this AQ stuff, we want a third one. And the ACC was saying the same thing. Like, we want a third one. Like that's fine if you want to do this, but we want a third bid. And I just, that apparently didn't get any traction, but everybody's trying to figure this out. And that's what we've talked about that in some of these shows recently, is that there's nobody's in charge here. And so Greg Sankey is in many ways the talking head, mostly responsible for the leadership here, whether he wants to be or not, because I don't know if I've ever heard Tony Petitti say anything. He's in charge of the Big Ten, and he's on permanent vacay. And what's funny is he's the one that really pushed for and suggested the automatic qualifier scenario from his time working with professional sports and whatnot. And yet he's sitting over here in his basement and letting Sankey take grenade after grenade, and Petitti's like, I mean, it's just funny, the dynamic that we've seen publicly. And I wasn't sure what the Big 12 stance would be here. I didn't know. Would they have a preferred format? Would they say, hey man, if y'all want to do that, that's fine, but we're not going to be a part of it? I mean, I just didn't know what layer or what was going to happen here. But it's kind of turned Greg Sankey into a bit of a villain, maybe more so than he already was. And yet he's fighting this perception. And I think that's what is tricky, because, again, the Big Ten has kind of hung the SEC, and particularly Greg Sankey, out to dry a bit. And then you've got all these other people going, what's going on here? And the AQ format was heavily criticized publicly. And yet I think that the format that the Big 12 has supported may be the worst for them from the standpoint of they may gain the least from that format. But we need to probably talk through that.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because that's sort of the vibe I'm getting. I'm asking myself, wait, so is the positioning actually improved here from some of the other proposed formats or what we've seen most recently in reality? And I'm not so sure about that. And I think the thought of the 3 AQ push now to the 1 AQ push, it was just a test by the Big 12 conference, kind of like cutting the baby or the bicycle in half, depending upon Old Testament or Seinfeld knowledge. You weren't supposed to want that. All along, for what's right for the game, we wanted the 1 automatic qualifier. Of course, the rest were just trial balloons to test how depraved you people were across the country. So, yeah, I don't think the Big 12 necessarily is gaining any extra ground they didn't already have. So I'm kind of wondering what you feel like is the motivation behind this preference.
I had said for the last year, really since this was suggested about the AQs, this kind of sucks. However, it's not that bad, and it may be the best you're going to do. And
an improvement on the present reality.
Correct. Because I think what you're about to get is much like what you had last year. So the 2 AQs would have been an improvement. Again, I'm not saying that, and I don't think you are either, saying that that's the way it was absolutely going to be, but odds are it would have continued status quo from the 1 year scenario that we've already seen and they've already kind of changed that. So even then, like Arizona State they wouldn't have had the bye. They may have been playing in mid-December on the road as opposed to hosting a game around New Year's with playing a team that had already played 1 game for the right to be able to play them. Okay, so I think the reality, and again, I can't pretend to know, but I think that the reality of them basically publicly admitting these other 2 leagues are twice what we are, the 4 versus 2, is just not something we're willing to stomach. We will take the chance. We will play it out. But we're not willing to give in to that perception. And I think your Mark is basically saying we want to go earn it. And I think that, keep in mind, this is going to be basically like a 4 to 5 year agreement here. And somebody's going to get hosed. A second Big 12 team may get hosed multiple times. In favor of, because I could just see it coming from a mile away. I mean, your 10-2 isn't as good as their 9-3. Pick your Big 10 or SEC team. But I think what is also to be determined is what criteria the selection committee utilizes. Who is on this committee? I think the SEC is asking lots of questions about this. And what's interesting is the ADs in the SEC, they wanted the AQ. They were all about the bird in the hand. Whereas the coaches were like, no, we want to play this thing out. Like, we want to, we don't want this tricked up deal, because where the coaches, and this is, I guess, ties into the Big 12 too, where the coaches are coming from at it is, okay, so if we have AQs and I'm an SEC head coach, you're about to give me a 9th regular season game. Then you're going to give me a 10th regular season game against a Big 10 school in a scheduling alliance. Then you're going to trick up championship weekend where there's 2 teams that may get a bye and there's 4 teams that are playing an extra game. And odds are I have a high probability of losing a lot of these. And so I choose not to run. Like the old Seinfeld, I choose not to run. Like I'm going to let my whenever Mr. Bevilacqua set off the gun when I was a little kid in the race, and I beat the guy right at recess. So
yes,
they
Mr.
don't. That's right. And so I think they are. So ultimately, the 5+11 scenario, what it does.
First, today's episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all the money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it can be easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. You're going to love the all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money today. Use our code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com and our code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for half off your first year.
Ultimately, the 5+11 scenario, what it does, if this is what's passed, it makes the regular season a lot more meaningful, or keeps it very meaningful. It doesn't change the dynamic, like where, say, remember last year when Ohio State, who won the national championship, remember when they lost to a very mediocre Michigan team?
Yeah, and then humiliated themselves on the field afterwards.
Yes.
I remember it very well.
In previous years, Ohio State, they're out. They're out of playoff scenarios. They're out of, whatever. But
let's fire the coach. Playoff, that's a time to have a convo about getting rid of the head man in Columbus. Instead, exactly, he's a national champion.
Exactly. And so it's the regular season will maintain serious relevance, but it is changed, as the example that we just gave you there. But because what was going to suck on the AQ deal is that it was going to be just rigged. But what also concerned me was that if you're going to do a lot of these at-large bids, they're going to game the system, and they've created the scheduling alliance with each other, and they're going to do all these things to where you're just kind of like you're helpless, like you can't do enough to improve your situation. So it seems like everything will stay fairly normal if they get their way here. And again, they're not there yet, but the 5-11 model seems to be picking up steam, which means if you're into the regular season, if you're into the conference championship game staying like it was and being extremely meaningful, then this is all good news for you. And if it's probably going to put some onus back on you to schedule up a bit in the non-conference. I think that you need to be careful with what you're doing in the non-conference with that many at-large bids, because I think if you try to cakewalk it, you better be darn near perfect, or there's just no hope for an at-large.
And sounds like I'm going to be, as a fan, I'm going to remain annoyed by the fact that a group of 5 representative will get some sort of, I guess, leg up or advantage over, I don't know, some years maybe between 8 and 12 power conference teams that are second or third place in their league and are probably better football teams than that group of 5 representative, but their record is not going to be as shiny. Is that right? I mean, we're still in that territory.
Well, it's certainly possible that they will be included, the highest, group of 5 champion, highest ranked. But we don't know yet whether, I'm assuming it'll be straight seeding, but see, that hasn't been decided on past this year.
That's true.
Yeah. And then what kind of buys is everybody going to get with a 16-team playoff, or does anybody get a buy? I think there's a lot of support for, play at 1 through 16, 2 plays 15, and you work your way through it that way, where everybody has to play all the way through. There is no advantage per se. So there's still plenty to try to determine what this ultimately looks like. But, and I guess you could still get some tricked up. You could still get some tricked up conference title games if that's what people ultimately want to do and they want to chance it. I don't know if the Big 12 could do it, but could like the SEC and Big 10 say, hey, whoever won the regular season championship and you're like the champion, we're keeping you out because you're going to get in, right? And then we'll play the next two ranked. I don't know if they'll get into that or not, or if they'll just leave it as is. Because I'm
interested in the tricked up conference championship weekend, man. Ever since you floated that, I'm wanting to see it. I don't think it's a bad idea. The conference championship games in general annoy me as they are.
But now it if they keep it this way, I would just, because conferences will say, yes, this conference championship game, like the winner goes. Like if you get the bid, however, you could make the argument it could hurt, the other team, or maybe it won't. Maybe whoever the two teams that are playing in these games in the power leagues are just they're in the best shape. But what's going to suck is if you played in that conference championship game and you lose it, and then somebody that was sitting out, they jump ahead of you because you played in it and lost. I mean, so that's why I say, because conferences will be all about what can we do to maximize the amount of bids we can get into this deal.
That's December Madness.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure the NCAA will trademark very soon, or whoever owns college football. We won't be able to say it any longer. Before we move on really quickly and wrap it up, talking about what's happening on campus with the Red Raiders here in just a minute in the month of June. I'm just curious, as a fan, how do you feel about the way that has impacted or altered stakes in the regular season? You just gave a great example of a very recent one that definitely made for a different reality than it would have in previous eras of college football, because I know myself, I've been so starved and agitated by college football's postseason for so long, starved for a proper format, that it's made me very willing to sacrifice some regular season weeks stakes or intensity. I don't even know if the intensity is lacking at all, but you get what I'm saying. And I know that over the years we've heard so much about, well, the regular season is college football's playoff. I've become so jaded by that, of course, because we all know that the SEC takes a week off to beat up on Nicholls State at some point later in the year. Big 12, ACC, Big 10 do it a little earlier. They all do it. So obviously those weekends are not what they describe them as. So I'm just kind of curious how you, Chris Level, the college football fan in general, have felt about the way that sort of the stakes or the ebb and flow is now being altered through the regular season and into the postseason.
I think that in a 16-team playoff, I think what they'll try to sell you on, and I don't disagree with this, is that there are more teams playing more important games far later into the season. In other words, it's kind of like it's why MLB created the wild card. We can create more drama down the stretch because there's more teams going for it or in the hunt and all those things. So I do think that is, and like we are ones that we like solid non-conference matchups, right? I mean, they're fun. Sure. We like when our team plays them, especially when they win them. When they lose them, we're like, what are you doing? Why are you even playing that game? Right? So we pick our poison there. But I think this format would keep the pressure on teams to maintain some level of non-conference scheduling to where it could cost you if you don't do it right, if you don't test yourself, and you could really be rewarded if you test yourself and you win it. And you do well there, because I think there could be some tiebreakers based on, well, they did this, but they did that, and
yeah,
I mean that's just the reality of it in an at-large scenario. Okay, if we think we're in the Big 12, really it's just about winning the league, and there's no plan B. Better be tops. The non-conference scheduling really comes into play when you start factoring in what kind of resume do you have in the at-large and all those things. But I was not expecting. I mean, the AQ stuff was reported so heavily and almost reported as like fact or like heavily, likely to pass, and everybody just talked about it. And then it's like poof. It just seems to be not the favored format, and the administrators in the SEC did not get their way because as the ADs, I think, and Sankey, who that's who Sankey works for, is the ADs and the presidents. That's because they're budget conscious, that they wanted the bird in the hand, and coaches are saying no, this isn't good, and it sounds like everybody else is. I just don't know what the Big Ten is saying, but it seems like the 5-11 model is the way this thing is pointing now. So we'll see when they get back together and what they ultimately decide on. But who gets buys? Is there any buys? What's the format? What's the calendar look like? I mean, there's plenty of things still left to decide, but they're under the gun here.
Yeah, no question about that. And look, you got 24 hours to float an idea and let it grow legs. We're moving on. Otherwise, as a media cycle, you get one day, sun up, sunset, whatever, and then we're on to different things. So that's no unusual thing to see something just disappear from the headlines as we move on to other, I'm sure, worthwhile pursuits. And I can only look at all of this as a consumer, Chris. I don't really care about other perspectives. That's the only thing I've ever been. So that's what I'm most well trained in. And the non-conference portion of this is not lost on me at all, because I have long since grown so bored with the non-conference subsidization matchups that we get into year in and year out. So Johnny University in a group of 5 category can fund his athletics department, I guess, means we've got to watch them for a week in September or late August. And I hope, and I never felt competitively that 1 loss or 2 losses should be reckon seasons as far as a chance to play for a title. So I'm hoping there's some more slack on the line as far as chances that teams are willing to take one in the non-conference portion. But like you talk about, there may be incentive that you better be willing to take some of these risks. Otherwise you'll be punished.
And here's what bothers me is that this was a hot topic too. And this was directly correlated with the playoff conversation and SEC's opinion on it, but the ACC is in the same boat, I believe. It is, to me, playing 8 conference games versus 9 is just a massive difference. And the SEC's been unwilling or haven't felt the need that it's worth it for us to do that. We're trying to widen home plate. You're not paying us enough money for us to do that. We want to go schedule the Citadel for an extra game in November, because like some of the stuff that comes out of these people's mouths, it's like, I get you've got a lot of blue bloods in the SEC, and it's the top level of it is very stout. I don't disagree, but them trying to tell everybody that Mississippi State and South Carolina in most years and Vanderbilt, and I don't care if Vanderbilt beat Alabama or not, and so many schools like that, even Oklahoma last year. Oklahoma was extremely average. Them trying to tell you that all parts are equal and all are the same. I don't know. I don't buy it. But an 8-game conference schedule versus a 9 is just different. And so when you get to the end of the year and you see these teams that go 7-2 or 8-1. I mean, we don't know. Is that normally? Is that would they have gone undefeated in that conference? If they'd have played 1 less? Was that, it's just different. So I would hope that there's some. I'm speaking in such a way that I just don't think I'll get my wish here, but I wish they would have a general criteria that everybody had to play the same amount of conference games. We're just not there yet. The ACC is no different. They're only playing 8 because a lot of their non-conference games cross over, like South Carolina and Clemson are playing each other and all that stuff. But they just schedule this one game in early November. All those SEC schools do, and it's like, I mean, it's a yeah. Well, yes, but it's a joke too.
Yeah, it is a joke. Yeah, I remember whenever the 9-game conference schedule started to be kicked around, Big 12, Big 10, I think the Pac-12 at that time, because I remember this report coming out of a newspaper in California, somebody writing about over time, statistically, how a 9-game schedule is just going to generate more 7-5 teams than an 8-game schedule does in producing 8 and 4 football teams. I know it doesn't seem like much of a difference, but you do kind of think over time, perception-wise, and bowl slotting wise, I don't know, whatever other way you want to look at it, what that might bear out when you've got one more non-conference opportunity to go get that win, either going say 3-1 or 4-0 in a non-conference slate versus 3 for those with the 9-game schedule. And now I'm just getting tired head again. I don't want to get triggered, so we'll move on, I promise. But that was the beginning of some real frustration when trying to think about solutions to the way that college football approaches crowning a national champion. The frustration was that you can't even get past the starting line because so far we hadn't even agreed what the regular season's supposed to look like. We're not even playing the same number of conference games. I mean, this is not like this is a new obstacle to tackle. So I don't know if they ever will, but yeah, that does make a difference. There's no question about that. Okay, we can move on. I don't want to get triggered.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
We can, believe me, I could go on and on, days, hours, years, decades. All of a sudden, it's a lifetime. What have you done? I've complained a lot about college football's postseason. That'll stack up for sure against anybody. Chris, before we get out of here, those guys here locally that we're hoping will be pursuing appearances in said postseason, whatever that actually looks like, are busy this month. And I don't want to dive too deep into it necessarily on today's episode, but I was wondering if you can kind of give us an idea of over the course of June what's taking place. As I know recruiting efforts are underway. And I'm kind of curious as well if maybe we're getting any feel for what some immediate years can look like moving forward when it comes to, say, I don't know, some shift back towards some high school or prep level prominence versus so much portal partying that we've gotten accustomed to as well. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, because we don't even know what the rules are going to be like, this coming season. But yeah, you're still in the in the old rules right now. But yeah, I think that there eventually will be, and it may be sooner than later, an importance put back on the high school recruiting. I think that you've got a great reputation out there. You have unbelievable facilities. You also have a buzz about you. But yeah, for those that don't follow this stuff, and it's still weird to me because I just grew up in this business pointing toward the first Wednesday in February, and that was what everything revolved around it. And then there was this early signing day, and which is in December, which started back, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago. But what is still so foreign to me is the fact that you're having the bulk of your big time official visits in June. And it's when Lubbock is the quietest. It's when the campus is the quietest. But this is when the who's who rolls through here, and your entire football staff is not only working, but they're working hard. And we'll cover this a ton on RedRaidersports.com as it relates to like just the recruiting. And if you're into that, who's coming in, what they said, all those things. But for Joey and his staff, this is a massive month. They had a little time off in May, but it's all hands on deck right now because you've got camps going on in the middle of the week, whether it's a high school prospect camp or a little kids camp or whatever. Those are sprinkled into the month of June. And so you get kids to come in and compete. You go, hey, man, because I think there was a camp on Sunday on campus. And I think that from that, they offered 8 or 9 players in the 27 and 28 recruiting classes. But starting this coming weekend, and there's a few sprinkled in the middle of the week, you'll start getting the bulk of your recruiting class, or what you hope to be part of your recruiting class, rolling through every weekend for 3 straight weekends. A lot of 4 stars, some 5 stars, a bunch of 3-star. I mean, if you're into that kind of thing, and it'll be a fairly newsy month in the recruiting world, and you'll kind of have a feel by the time we get to July 1 on kind of what your recruiting class looks like. But yeah, they will be extremely busy over their football and over there in those offices at the Womble and the South End and all the like. And
hoping that some talent is attracting some talent, because I would think there's some wind in your recruiting sales, given some of what you've added here recently and just some of the attention you've gotten.
I think this is where the portal class has a chance to pay some dividends, because things have changed in that you're bringing in much better higher profile high school players than you used to. Man, you try to attract them, and like you almost get them here, and then maybe not, or you get very few of them. Now the bulk is from this group, and what Joey and his staff will do strategically, they will let these kids on these visits get around these big time portal guys and their current returners too. I mean, like your Barons and Jacob Rodriguez's and all those folks too, Caleb Douglas and all those folks. But I just think they want to see, whoa, so this is what the athletes here look like. Okay, maybe this is the place for me. I mean, that it's you will utilize those portal guys, even though many people will say, hey man, we're only going to get these guys for so many months, and what if we don't win as many games as we want to? Well, they have a chance to pay some dividends for you this time of year as well. Just because I think that mom and dad and player, they like to see, I just think that speaks volumes without saying anything. Wait, they got like 5'6'3" corners around here? Goodness gracious. So that's what I'll end up being? Like they got a 6'4", 320-pound DT running around here. He's going to the NFL. Like, that's what I want to be. I mean, goodness. I mean, like, so I just think all that stuff has a chance to pay some dividends, but that those guys will certainly be utilized. Should be a fun month.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think especially with some of these guys that have got legitimate NFL prospects as far as their future to also suggest something about the state of things at Tech, in that they would trust their time to the Red Raiders and continuing to develop them along that path. So exciting to think about the work that could continue as far as continuing to build a roster for the future. Chris, appreciate your time as always, man. Enjoyed it. Thank you for the insights and perspectives, and looking forward to the next one. We'll see you then.
Hey, man, sounds good. Appreciate it. Fun time of year, even though we got still, I don't know, what 90, 95 days before the season starts. But we'll keep grinding and pushing, man. Appreciate everybody listening to Locked On Texas Tech. We'll talk to you next time.
Get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. We appreciate you for being out there. Thanks to the Everydayers for always being there. It's right there in the title. And thanks to the Matador Mob. Hit the show notes and find a link to a free 14-day trial. That's your direct line to Chris and myself with one-on-one text sent straight to your phone. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks as always, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.